Okay, so this video is basics on how to identify your variables. I mean, ultimately, it's just going to take practice, but here's some basic things to keep in mind when you're looking through the information given to you and you're trying to figure out what to use where. Because a lot of times on this quiz, people were missing or mixing up the force of friction and the coefficient of friction, and that is a huge difference. So hopefully we can clarify some of that here. So FK stands for kinetic friction, and the units are always newtons. Then FS means static friction. The units are also newtons. Anytime we've got an F like that, it pretty much means force, and that means newtons. And I did my best to draw a little mu right here. It's not an M, it's a mu. Mu is a Greek letter, like a whole different set of letters, whole different alphabet. Mu is the coefficient of friction. Okay, we call it mu, not M. Or U, not U. It's mu. So mu means the coefficient of friction. And there are no units with this number. It describes a relationship, and so the units all cancel out. It's comparing newtons with newtons. And then in our cases, it's always going to be a small decimal, like less than 1, 0 to 1, because there's only a couple cases where it's more than 1, and we're not really going to deal with those. So it should always be less than 1. Then Fn means normal force. Remember, that's the up arrow. The units are also newtons. M is the mass. The units are kilograms. A means acceleration. And the units are meters per second squared. And so acceleration, if you're talking about weight, it could be gravity. But if you're talking about the acceleration of a box along a surface, that's not gravity. You're accelerating sideways. Gravity is only down. So that doesn't necessarily always have to be 9.8. So we'll have a lot of practice for this, but these are just some general rules to remember when looking for your variables. So if you're trying to find the coefficient of friction, it will either be called mu, or they will say it's the coefficient of friction if it's given in your problem. And it's going to be a decimal. And that coefficient of friction is different than the friction force. The friction force can be calculated using the coefficient of friction, but they are not the same number. And so the coefficient of friction really does not belong in your free body diagram. Only the kinetic friction or static friction do. They are forces. Free body diagrams are made of forces. The coefficient of friction is only used to help you find those forces. Okay, so just remember these differences between all these different variables, especially when you're trying to identify them.